Covering up now. Born in the USA. I was born in the USA. I was born in the USA. Born in the USA now. Got in a little hometown jam. So they put a rifle in my hands. Sent me off to a foreign land to go and kill the yellow man. Born in the USA. I was born in the USA. Born in the USA. I was born in the USA. Come back home to the refineries. How a man said, son, if it was up to me. Went down to see my VA man. He said, son, don't you understand now? I had a brother, I can't solve. Fighting off our Viet Cong. They're still there, he's all gone. He
Voy a
had
poner
a
por
woman
en esta
in
parte.
Saigon. I got a picture of a little down the shadow of the penitentiary, out by the gas fires of the refinery. I'm 10 years burning down the road. Nowhere to run, ain't got nowhere to go.
Good. I thought we were going to have background music for this. Well, look, good evening, everyone. I'm Christopher Bruce, the Deputy Executive Director of the ACLU of Georgia. Thank you for being here today with the ACLU of Georgia and, of course, our great coalition partners, Indivisible Georgia Coalition. All of you have been engaged in the fight for civil liberties and civil rights in our state. At the time when democracy is under attack in state legislatures across the country, it is more important than ever that we remain informed, organized, and engaged. The challenges we face are real, but so is our power to shape what comes next. I want to start by acknowledging something many people in this room have likely felt over the past year: helplessness. It can feel as though powerful interests and elected officials are moving at a lightning speed to dismantle hard-fought freedoms, while the people who are supposed to protect those rights are unwilling or unable to stop them. But this legislative session reminded me that we are anything but helpless. On the first day of session, we partnered with Indivisible Georgia Coalition to bring hundreds of people down to the Capitol. Together, we sent a clear message to lawmakers. The people of Georgia are paying attention, and we will not be ignored. Throughout session, community members continued to show up. They met with legislators, testified in committee meetings, attended advocacy days, made phone calls, sent emails, and organized online, and so much more. They reminded elected officials that their decisions affect people in real communities, not just lobbyists or not just special interests. So every time we put on a call to action, we saw people answer. They refused to sit on the sidelines, and because of that collective effort, a lot of bad bills were slowed down or even stopped, and lawmakers were forced to reckon with their voices of the people they represent. We saw that same power extend beyond the regular legislative session. When the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Louisiana versus Calais created new concerns about redistricting in Georgia, advocates across the state mobilized quickly. Community members made it clear that lawmakers should not use a special session to redraw maps that will weaken the political power of Black communities. That public pressure mattered, and redistricting was ultimately taken off the table. Huge win that we all enjoy to this day. So tonight, let's take an opportunity to reflect on what happened during the legislative session, celebrate the work that was done, and let's talk honestly. Really, let's talk honestly about the challenges ahead. But most importantly, it is a reminder that meaningful change has never come without a handful of people in positions of power. It has always come ordinary people who get involved and stay engaged. Literally, power to the people. So, there's a lot to cover over the next hour and a half. We'll begin with a panel discussion featuring advocates from the ACLU of Georgia and the Indivisible Georgia Coalition, followed by the opportunity for you to ask questions of us. We'll also hear from a volunteer from the Indivisible Georgia Coalition, and we will wrap up with the key action items and final reflections on the workload ahead. Remember, this is a conversation, but there will be action at the end. So let's move on to our panel. Happy to bring on Sarah Hunt Blackwell, Senior Policy Counsel of the ACLU of Georgia, Tori McFarland, Community Organizer, Fellow for the Voter Access Project of the ACLU of Georgia, and Christopher Quinn, member of Indivisible Georgia Coalition. Welcome, everybody. We'll cover some of the most important bills we were watching this past session, the issues that were top of mind of legislators, how power and influence operate at the Capitol. Let's talk about the impact of the Calais decision. I know that's still in the news. And well, of course, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So make sure you put your questions in the chat. That's where we're going to have the discussion and indicate if there's a particular panelist that you want to respond. So, as a reminder, Georgia's legislative session operates on a 2-year cycle. That means bills that didn't pass the first year of the biennial, that's the 2025 session, remain active for the 2026 session. That's the second year of the cycle. Now that it's over, we're now going to be in a new biennial. So this session was interesting because there were prominent themes in the types of legislation that were introduced. One of those themes was crackdowns on protests. Sarah, can you walk us through Senate Bill 443 and other bills implicated by protest activity?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Hunt Blackwell. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Senior Policy Counsel at the ACLU of Georgia. This session was definitely an interesting one, and one of the themes and trends that we saw was a focus on protest. Understandably so. In the last few years, we've seen a lot of different protests happening across the country, across the world. Obviously, last year, the No Kings protest started throughout the United States, and Georgia was a top location for these protests. So it only made sense that once the legislative session started this year in January, that there was a particular focus on protest. And one of the bills that we saw come through was Senate Bill 443. This was a bill that kind of had two issues overlapping each other. So it actually was a penalty enhancement bill. So it has criminal legal implications, but those penalty enhancements had to do with First Amendment protected activity or protest. So we saw criminal legal issue and a First Amendment issue kind of smushed together in this bill. And what SB 443 said was that the existing law against obstruction of passageways in Georgia would be increased from a simple misdemeanor to a high and aggravated misdemeanor. This seems like a simple change, and penalty wise, it parts of it are pretty simple. The jail time for a simple misdemeanor versus a high and aggravated misdemeanor are exactly the same. The fine is increased, the monetary fine increases, but other than that, there's not really much difference in the actual penalty between those two classifications of crimes. The issue really with SB 443 is that we saw that this was a direct target, a direct attack on First Amendment protest. It's not about the fact that the increase in the penalty was relatively small by some considerations. It's the fact that the legislature, and specifically the bill sponsor, called protests out by name during the committee meetings and specifically said that one time he was leaving the Capitol and there were protesters outside of the Capitol that had gotten in the streets and it frustrated him. And he cited that example specifically as the reason why he came to the legislature this year and decided to increase that penalty. So, what that means now is that it is still up to the discretion of a district attorney or a prosecutor to charge someone with obstruction of public passageways. But now, if someone is charged with that crime, then it is a high and aggravated misdemeanor, which is the penalty that is right below a felony here in the state of Georgia. Um, Another issue that we had with this bill is that this bill really targeted unpermitted protests. If anyone has either organized a protest or attended a protest, you understand that there are multiple ways that protests come about. Um, some protests go through a full permitting process where you submit an application and get approval from your local jurisdiction, make sure that you have road closures, all of that. That whole process can be very time consuming and also very costly. So, not a lot of organizations or individuals have the luxury of being able to go through that full process all the time, each time that they want to demonstrate. So we were very, very concerned about the way that this bill would implicate unpermitted protests and also protests that don't even require a permit. If there's a person who's holding a sign on a street corner or holding a sign or a banner over a bridge or over the highway, these are the things that we were thinking about with this bill because technically, in some jurisdictions, permits aren't required for those actions. But because of SB 443, a police officer could arrest someone exercising their First Amendment right, and a prosecutor could convict or could charge under this crime. So SB 443 was a big one. Unfortunately, it did pass both houses or both chambers of the legislature, and it was signed by the governor. So SB 443 that increased penalty enhancement from a simple misdemeanor to a high and aggravated misdemeanor was passed here in the state of Georgia, and it is now currently law.
Thank you for that, Sarah. A little more history towards it. I remember Senate Bill 443. This is not the first time the legislature has introduced it. I remember fighting this bill back in 2017. So it pretty much took them a decade to pass it. There's another reason why we need to continue on with the fight. Speaking of it being signed into law, we know May 12th was 40 days after sine die, which is the last day of legislative session. So can you talk about the significance between the last day of legislative session and the 40 days that happen before the governor actually signs, vetoes, or does not do anything with the bill?
That's a great question. Those 40 days are super critical. It's like if anyone knows their Bible stories, it's like the 40 days and 40 nights um, that Jesus was out in the wilderness. But that's kind of a very good analogy because that's what it feels like in Georgia in that 40 days between the last day of legislative session and the day where the governor is supposed to make some action on bills. So as Chris said, in that 40 days, the governor basically the ball is in his court. The legislature has done all of their business. They've passed what they're going to pass. They've not passed things that they don't want to pass. And the ball is fully in the governor's court about whether to sign the legislation that has come to his desk, to veto the legislation, or to not take any action on it at all. If the governor does not take any action on a bill, then it automatically goes into effect and automatically becomes law after that 40 days, even if he doesn't actively sign it. So those are kind of the three options that we see. In the case of SB 443, the governor did actually sign this. It wasn't one that he just let default into law. It was signed by him.
Right. There was another bill that was passed that was not signed by the governor, about college free speech. You want to talk about that?
Yes, SB 552. Um, this bill was called the TPUSA Act, and very polarizing acronym. It did not stand explicitly for Turning Point USA, but it was the True Patriotism Act. And what this bill does is basically allows, or it kind of codifies First Amendment protections that already exist at a federal level. So basically, it allows for student organizations at all levels of education to be able to create their organization, even if there's a political leaning, even if there's a political bias or social issue bias to that organization. It allows them to have that organization at their school, have meetings, use school facilities for those meetings, and essentially not be discriminated against by the school based on the either social issue or political leaning of the organization. As I mentioned, the name of the legislation was very, very controversial, and there were a lot of more Democratic, progressive leaning lawmakers who wanted to sign on to the bill, but they were reluctant to because of the acronym that the bill was named. And ultimately, it did pass the House and the Senate, but this is one of those bills that just defaulted and became law after 40 days, even though the governor did not sign it. This was a bill that we actually supported, again, because of the content of the bill, not necessarily the name. But the content of the bill was good. And it's important now for students across Georgia to know that they have state protections against discrimination for organizations that they want to start and have on school campuses.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Just want to distinguish between a bill that had been signed into law and a bill that wasn't signed into law. So thank you for that summary. We're still going along with themes, and there was efforts this year, like every year, to roll back accountability for law enforcement. So Christopher Quinn, never met a bad Chris. Can you talk about House Bill 1223 and Senate Bill 482. These are the things
Sure.
that yeah. Oh, you know what, Chris, go ahead. Let's hear
All
from you,
right.
Quinn.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
These two bills fall into a category of a lot of bills that I saw as creating a more authoritarian role for government,
Mhm.
like the anti-protest bills that were being signed. So House Bill 1223 and 482 generally fell into the same category of trying to limit public access to police videos that were produced by police body cameras and police dashboard cameras. Um, Now, there are Georgia open records law that allow citizens to access to those after a certain amount of time, after a shooting or a death by a police officer has been adjudicated in some fashion. This would have closed off access to those, and that's important because those open records, and we have the right to those open records under Georgia's open records law because we have the right to see and know what our government is doing or what it's failing to do, what its communications are. And this would have created a loophole so that those videos would no longer have been available to the public or would have essentially been impossible to get because of the high standards that they were going to require for somebody to actually get their hands on those. Now, that's important if you think back to the Alex Pretty case. The protester was shot in Minnesota 5 times in the back by ICE officers. Fortunately, there were a lot of protesters there who were filming the incident, but most cases in which police officers are filming themselves and they're involved in some sort of death, um, the only people there are the police officers. So those are the only videos that we would be able to see in a case like the Preddy case. That's important to us because we want to be able to understand and know what happened and get beyond the government spin. If you'll recall the Brady case, again, immediately after, even before things were clear, people in the Trump administration were issuing responses of what had happened. For instance, Christy Nome said that Alex Brady was brandishing a gun and threatening officers. That was a lie. Stephen Miller said that he was an assassin who tried to kill officers. That was a lie. Head of the FBI, Kash Patel, said that Patey was breaking the law by being out there with a gun. That was a lie. Fortunately, we had those public videos of other protesters and not just the police videos. And think of what would have happened if we had not had access to those police videos and we had no public out there filming. We would have had the government lying, and we would have not been able as citizens to check on what had actually happened in that case. And I think that, excuse me, the videos show that was a homicide and show clearly what happened and got beyond the government lying on that. And here, at a few months after that, we had Georgia government trying to limit the public's access to those types of videos so that we wouldn't have an opportunity to check on whether police officers made mistakes in what they were doing, and whether police officers made a legal killing or whether it was an illegal killing, a self-defense type killing. You have to think that protects police officers from false charges, as well as it allows us to see those cases in which police officers are acting outside of the law. And we've seen many cases of that in recent years. Those two bills would have, again, limited our access to those types of videos and made them virtually impossible to get. I was able to speak to Representative Joseph Gillette from Dallas, Georgia, about why he introduced that bill, and he gave it a vanilla wrapper. This bill actually got some Democratic support and some Democratic votes in the Senate. And what he said was that there was a case in Georgia in which a family lost a family member. And it wasn't that the police officers had acted wrongly, but they had showed up in an emergency situation. This person who died was not doing anything wrong. She was simply in distress, and they were there to help. But there is there's a guy who gets police videos like that show extenuating circumstances, police chases, police shootings. He puts them up online on a website to try to make money off of that. And when he did that with this case, the family in Georgia saw that and they were obviously distressed about that. That's obviously a wrong way to act. Here was a member of their family, dying for all the public to see. And so he decided that the representative decided that he would try to quote unquote fix that problem by carving out police videos in which someone dies from the public record so that the public would no longer have essential access to them. And that sounds like a great deal or a great reason to do that, but obviously it went far beyond fixing the problem. They could have created a law that was more targeted at those particular types of action where someone tries to monetize, make money off of public records such as police videos. But he went obviously beyond that. There was a bill in the Senate, bill in the House, the one in the House, the one that was put out by Representative Gillette was the one most likely to pass and had the most momentum behind it. But it was people like ACLU and other media companies and others who really put a lot of pressure on the Senate and the House, and that neither of those bills actually made it across for a vote. So that was a good thing, and it was an idea of how citizen activity and people like ACLU and Indivisible Georgia can get involved to lobby people and make them see some common sense on this and see how that would be bad for democracy to have those public records carved out so that we can no longer have access to them and understand what our police are doing when they're acting well and when they're acting badly.
Christopher, thank you for that summary. Democracy dies in the dark. Thank you for all the work that you did on that case, on that bill, and everyone else who worked on it. That was definitely a major victory. So I'm going to go into another topic that may be sensitive to a lot of you because it continuously comes up. That is Georgia's electoral system, okay? Especially as we head into a major midterm. This year was no different. 2024 lawmakers passed Senate Bill 189. I know y'all are familiar with this. This is the bill that required the state to shift ballot counting from reading QR codes to reading the human readable text on ballots by July 1st of 2026. So, Tori, I'm coming to you. The Voter Access Project. This was among the advocates urging the governor to call a special session to delay the implementation of Senate Bill 189. Can you talk about why advocates were concerned about the timeline, especially the potential consequences where the election administrations and ultimately you were down there at the Capitol? Why don't you add in what happened during special session?
Right. So, of course, as you mentioned, 2024, SB 189 was passed, required removal of the QR codes for counting tabulation purposes. So, when that bill was passed, it was done without a few key considerations. Key considerations like what the replacement system will be, the funding for that system, and guidance for counties. And all three of those are important for very different reasons. On the guidance piece, Georgia requires that counties run uniform elections. And because the legislature did not give guidance when they implemented that, they didn't have that. So paradoxically, if a county wanted to address this in an individual way, they could not do that without then being in violation of the law. So what that means is, in trying to comply with the law, they would be breaking it. That's one thing. Now, there's a couple of, yeah, there's a
I don't
couple
know,
of other
it's a lot, Tori.
considerations
It's a
there.
lot.
Now, let's say that we try to rush and do a system this year in the midst of a major election, when there are other things to consider, such as training. Most counties had already done training on this current system for a lot of poll workers. It's what they know. It's what they know how to do. So you would have to consider the hours that we spend retraining folks, the possible errors those folks might make, things like ballot printing. Major counties have hundreds of different ballot styles. You have to consider all of those things. There's costs associated with those, and we hadn't put any money aside for that. So, of course, that's the funding piece. Now, on that training piece, when you have a new system in the middle of an election year that you're trying to implement, this is in the scenario that the legislator didn't act. We'll talk about what actually happened in a second here. That lends itself to things like legal challenges that have a basis for things like not certifying elections. Speaking frankly, in that case, you get things like counties being sued into oblivion. So, quite frankly, we don't want that. So, the solution is to extend the deadline. And we specifically ask for the deadline to be extended to 2028 because that gives us time to come up with that replacement system and then do things like run pilot programs in 2027 so that when 2028 comes, we have a system that is in place. We've had time to train our people. We've worked out the kinks so that there won't be legal challenges, and we have a good, proper system in place that counties can move forward with and comply with that law. Now, as for what happened in special session,
Yep.
after much advocacy, getting people down, legislative working groups, legal observers, capital observers, working with partners to get people down. I am, of course, pleased to report that the delay of implementation is exactly what happened. The SB 3X, the name of the bill, was passed, and it delays implementation of that until January 1st, 2028. There will be a committee put in place to recommend a system in 2027 so that pilot programs can then be run. So it's just another example of what happens when we get together and we tell legislators, look, you created a problem, let's fix it, and let's do so in a way that takes accountability for our counties.
Corey, you know what? I want to emphasize that again. So you're telling me that advocates called for a special session, urged the governor to do it. He actually did it,
Yes,
especially to push back the QR code issue. And that's what happened.
and that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened. I mean, I don't think there's a better example of power belonging to the people than that. So let's keep going on with the scope of special session. And ultimately, it extended beyond the election administration issues because there were other things that were called into it. So again, the Supreme Court decision in Calais, several governors across the South, including Georgia's your governor, Brian Kemp, called lawmakers back into session, not just for SB 189, but also for redistricting. So why does the Calais decision matter in Georgia? And again, what happened during special session?
Right. So Louisiana versus Calais. Its decision weakens what remained of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that protects Black and minority voters. So what that did is that decision opened the door for states to draw districts in a way that dilutes the power of minority voters, as long as they claim that they are using partisan goals rather than racial bias. Full stop. A bunch of Southern counties are rushing to redraw district lines, and Governor Kemp calls a special session to our surprise, not just to address the QR code issue, but to redistrict. So, of course, we got together with many of our great partners. We put out things to pack the Capitol. We activated our legislative working group. We got some of our great leaders who do things like attend county board meetings and advocate there. We got all those folks down to the Capitol. We got partners who had people bus in from different cities. We had leaders bus in from different cities. And we got there, we put a bunch of pressure on. There were protests at Liberty Plaza where we fielded legal observers, worked with partners there, press conferences, and we really put the pressure on. And we put the pressure on so well, in fact, that a couple hours before they gavelled in, they took redistricting off the menu, so to speak. And it was because, and I quote, we don't want to energize the opposition. I don't think they quite succeeded at that goal. We were energized anyway, but the story is the same in that case. When you show up and you show up in number and you advocate for good governance and you put pressure on bad actors, they fold. And that's what happened here.
And that's what happened. I mean, calling for a special session, and people were wary about us calling for a special session because of redistricting. But we had to deal with the QR code issue. I think the critical point in this is it was really the people that made an influence. It was the people that made a difference. So you didn't say where that quote came from, Tori.
Burns, of all
This,
people.
yes, the Speaker of the House, John Burns, had that quote of saying, "Hey,
Right.
we're not doing this."
So
Um,
good
Go ahead.
success all around here. We got the QR code issue solved. We got redistricting off the menu, and it's because people showed up and will continue to show up. So this isn't over. There could, I'm gonna knock on wood here, be another special session this year, but If not, then certainly this will be something we address at the next regular session, and we'll show up there too.
And we'll show up there too. Let's go back to Christopher, who this was your first time showing up during a legislative session in Georgia. Let's talk more about your experience because there might be other people's first time or they've never been at the Capitol. Were there any aspects of power and influence that operate at the Capitol? Anything that surprised you? What did you observe about lobbying and special interests? How did you feel about this moving forward through 40 days of the legislative session?
Thanks again, Chris. So this was my first time down at the Capitol in about 10 years. I had been at the Capitol for a couple of years in a different capacity before. And when I was at the Capitol before, there were a lot of lobbyists, and you see them in the hallways, and you see them buttonholing representatives and senators on the ropes, talking to them and in their ear all the time. And if there's a difference between 10 years ago and now, it seemed to me that there were even more lobbyists representing various companies, various industries, various interests than 10 years ago. So yeah, I think we all know that more and more money is being poured into campaigns, and part of that money being poured into campaigns is being poured into lobbyists so that they can be in the ears of legislators every day during the session. And it can be good if you're lobbying for the right issues, and of course that can be deleterious if you're lobbying for the worse issues. So there seemed to be more of that, but I was glad to see also a difference in the outcomes from 10 years ago to today. I think there was a real impact in what we were doing in that we saw so many bad bills that had been proposed that ended up not getting a final vote or not making it across from one chamber to the other, from the Senate to the House. So again, I think that people showing up, people calling, people writing, people coming with the ACLU or with Indivisible Georgia to lobby their legislators on the ropes. That's a little area outside the Senate and the House where you can actually call your legislator out and talk to them for a few minutes. I think it made an impact, a noticeable impact, because there was so much bad that could have happened from this session. Just like the redistricting didn't happen, and there were a lot of bills that didn't happen. And I think, again, that's it doing, at least in some part, to what we and others were doing as volunteers out there.
Christopher, I thank you for sharing your perspective within it. So that means you're coming back, right? Well, look, everyone, give it up for our panelists. Thank you all for such detailed and thoughtful perspectives on this year's legislative session, not just the regular legislative session, but the special session as well. We're going to enter into our question and answer portion of the event. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll call them out to specific people, and let's have this conversation. So let's start with Kate Davis. Question one, please include the League of Women Voters of Central Savannah River area in support of your efforts to protect voting rights. Katie, I can tell you up front, we are going to do that. So let's have a conversation. I'm looking at my screen over here, by the way, to look off of this. Here's the question. How can we stay informed? Sarah, I'm going to give that question to you.
There are actually a lot of ways to stay informed. The ACLU of Georgia this year, for the first time, we put out a regular newsletter. So we had a newsletter going out during session every other week, talking about everything that was going on under the Gold Dome. We tried to be as thorough as possible, and obviously during legislative session, things move very, very quickly. So we tried to include the most up-to-date information in that newsletter, but that's a fantastic way. And even outside of legislative session, signing up for our email alerts is a great way to stay in the know about everything we have going on. Our website has all of our events. It has all of our projects that we're working on. Tori is over our LEAD program, which basically helps to monitor election boards across the state. That's a very important thing that we have a very important program, and all of the updates and information about that are on our website. On our social media, we have everything posted there as well. We are ACLU of GA across all social media platforms. there's plenty of ways, at least with from an ACLU of Georgia perspective, for you all to stay in the know about the issues that we're working on and the ways that you can get involved and help us solve these issues as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And I saw Gael pop in too. Gael, do you want to add anything?
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name is Gael Zayman. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for ACLU of Georgia. I would just like to just echo everything that Sarah said. Our comms team does a really great job of updating our social media, so you can find CTAs, call to actions there. You can also reach out. We have a Pro Georgia initiative where we help with permitting. So if you have any protests or anything like that that you plan on organizing, we can help you with that. So you can find all the information on our website, as Sarah said. So.
There you go. Thank you, Gael. Let's go to our next question. Tori, I'm coming to you with this. How is the QR code issue solved?
Right. So right now, there is, like I said, we pushed the deadline back to January 1st, 2028. And in that time, there will be a committee formed. And that committee will have until January 1st, 2027 to recommend a new system and equipment specifications to the legislature. They will then choose from a pool of systems recommended, and we will have pilot programs run that year in 2027 to then choose ultimately what system we will move forward with. And so that pilot program is intended to give us time to work out kinks, to, of course, figure out funding and all those other good things that SB 189 did not figure out for us. And ultimately, whatever system is selected in that 2027 year will be what we move forward with in 2028.
Good. So let's be clear about this. The July 1st, 2026 issue is solved, but we
Yes.
have to look at voting altogether.
Right. So that still brings to issue that this committee will be deciding, will we ultimately recommending to our legislator what system to move forward with, which means that we have to show up to these committee meetings because they're going to be hearing from experts. They're going to be hearing from experts about technology, hearing from experts of things about accessibility. And so we need to be there. We need to be there to advocate on behalf of disabled voters because they'll ultimately still need to use machine tabulation. So we need special exceptions made for things like that. We need to, and just in general, get our elected officials and cybersecurity experts who know what they're talking about down there to communicate to this committee on the type of systems Georgia needs to move forward with. So
We all picked up what Tori was saying. He said cybersecurity people who know what they're talking about, not the people who do not know what they're talking about. So yes,
there are
this
plenty of people in Georgia who claim to be cybersecurity experts. We are going to make sure actual experts are at these meetings.
there we go. And not only that, I know Sarah talked about it, Gail talked about it. How can people find out about these meetings? How can they sign up? How can they come and testify?
We will always have all of this information on our websites. The second we know it, it will go up. You can follow our socials. We'll more than likely have committee meeting times posted there, and you can follow us there. We'll have those times for you. And of course, our newsletter, email alerts. You sign up for those, they'll go out. We'll say, hey, ping committee meeting, this date, this time, be there. You'll show up. I'll be there with you too. And I hope to see you there. We'll advocate together.
It's a good time. If you haven't advocated with Tori, you're missing out. Sarah, I'm coming to you with this next question. There was an article yesterday that Texas convicted an anti-ICE protester of terrorist charges. Is this what SB 443 is?
That's such a great question. No, SB 443 is not the same crime. The crime in SB 443 is not the same as terrorist charges. SB 443 enhanced the criminal penalties for obstruction of public passageways in Georgia. So that was a law that was already on the books, and SB 443 just increased the criminal penalty from a simple misdemeanor to a high and aggravated misdemeanor. However, Big asterisk here because Georgia does also have a domestic terrorism ordinance or law on the books that protesters have been charged with. And we saw this a few years ago. The ACLU of Georgia was a huge advocate against the domestic terrorism bill that came in what was that, 2017, Chris?
Yes, I am
2018?
2017. Yes.
Right. And I was not at the affiliate, but Chris was, and Chris, but mentioned that part of the advocacy against the bill at that time was the forethought of knowing that it was legislation that could possibly be used against protesters in the future, and that's exactly what happened in 2024. So, SB 443 is not a terrorism bill, but we do have a domestic terrorism charge in Georgia that has been used against protesters before.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up too, Sarah, because look, as much as we're down there fighting at the Capitol, things can come up one year, come back the next year, all the time. We have to continue to fight. And it has to be new people. It has to be other people who there's this first time, or if it's your eighth time, we still need you at the Capitol. Thank you for that answer. So next question. What happened with the proposed legislative provision to require hand recounts of the top two races in Georgia, and what does that mean for the November's governor's race? Tori.
I'm glad someone asked, because this is another example of what happens when we organize around a different topic. So, originally, the bill had no hand count add-ons, but as it was brought to the floor, there was an amendment that stated that there would be a mandatory hand recount for the top two races in every election, regardless of margins. Now, we advocated around that, as we tend to do here. We spoke with legislators on the ropes, we got our people on it, and we were able to mitigate the risk of that greatly. So, before this bill passed, there was a recount provision that if there was a 0.5%, so 0.5% difference or less, then that would trigger that a candidate could ask for a machine recount. So much less than the original amendment there. So what ended up happening was that we were able to mitigate. I'm sorry, I'm in an office building here. Don't know what that was.
Okay.
So we were able to greatly mitigate that. And so what the amendment ended up becoming was that now if there is a 0.5% or less difference between a winner and loser in the top two races, then there triggers a mandatory recount. So what we've done is we've switched from an optional to a mandatory recount in that provision. So whereas before there was a recount regardless of margins, regardless of anything, those top two races would always get a recount. We were able to greatly mitigate that. And so now there's only a recount if there is a 0.5% or less difference.
There you go. And that's Senate Bill 3X. Okay. Thanks, Tori. Tori, make sure you're okay over there. Okay. Let's go to our next question dealing with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones mentioned just before the adjournment that the legislature may reconvene in November for another special session. My suspicion, that's what they're writing, is that Kent will wait until the elections are over when they don't have to worry about energizing Democrats to work on redistricting again. He may have been kidding, but has anyone heard anything about this? Who wants to take this question? Sarah, I'm coming back to you on this one.
Well, okay. I was gonna say that maybe you should take it, Chris. I know that
Honestly, I didn't want to, but
you
in fact, I will. I'll chime in a little bit more. Julie, thank you for bringing this up. I think that's very astute and more of the political play that happens in Georgia. You really want to know what people are going to do before they do it. So, as you said before, there is a chance, while the lieutenant governor was talking about it, there is a chance that another special session could come up. The more than likely portion of this comes into what happens in the November elections. So if the House changes parties, the majority party changes hands, or if there is a change in any of your statewide races, especially governor, then the state legislature may come in and reconvene again with the majority party that's already in power. And the reason why they want to do this is because if there is a change or a shift in power between the parties, they would want their powers to be upheld while others can't. So, like we said before, we are a nonpartisan organization, so we try to stay away from talking about Democrats and Republicans, but this is factual information. Republicans are in power in the Georgia General Assembly. There is a chance that Democrats may be in power in the state house. If Democrats get into power into the state house, then Georgia Republicans, before the Democrats get into power, Georgia Republicans in November or early December may reconvene in a special session and they may redraw lines, make different rules or guidelines, or do certain things. This isn't crazy talk. This not has only happened in the state of Georgia. It's also happened in other states like North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania. Anytime parties change hands, power changes hands, parties normally go into a special session to make sure that the last ounce of power that outgoing majority party has, they can actually implement. So I hope that answered your question, Julie. The only thing that really gets to me is we may have another special session coming up. So much more time for us to go have some fun down there. We are with the wonderful, phenomenal, one and only Deborah Scott. Thank you so much. Count on us, stand up with you. Stand Up is such a phenomenal organization, and you do such great work, Deborah Scott. Thank you for being here, and thank you for always supporting. We stand behind you too. Going to the next question. David, how can both the ACLU and Indivisible work together to register more eligible voters in light of efforts to disenfranchise voters? That is a great question, David, and I'm going to answer that one too. Here's the thing. Indivisible, y'all do such a great job, especially registering voters, everything else. There's something that we don't do. The ACLU of Georgia does not register voters. Now, here's the thing. That doesn't mean that we won't help you with setting up protests or setting up areas to do that, but the ACLU of Georgia does not register voters. We're more focused on protecting your right to vote and making it as easy and accessible as possible. So as much as us in the ACLU of Georgia and Indivisible have, what have we partnered on so far? No Kings 3 times, legislative session, and so many other things. We're happy to partner with you so much more, just not on voter registration. So thank you, David. Thank you for thinking of us, and we'll work together, believe me. Wait, is this Janice asking for something? Janice, the famous Janice, our best volunteer with capitals. Come on, Janice. I'm gonna read your question. Can Tori speak to the point that it's important that we have folks who have some subject area knowledge show up at meetings to ensure that so-called experts actually have some expertise? Janice, I think Tori was talking about it a little bit. So Tori, why don't you come back and make an emphasis on this point?
Right. So thank you again for the question, Janice. It's always good to see you at any function like this. So here in Georgia, we have a good group of people who claim to be cybersecurity experts who do things like present voter challenge mechanic systems here at our state election board meetings or form groups to, again, challenge voters all over Georgia. And it's important when you have opposition whose goal it is to suppress the vote in any way they can, it's important that you have experts who are there to give you factual information, to try to expand voter access. Think of that, the guy who's in the voter access project working to expand voter access. It's important that you have experts that are there to do the opposite, to work with officials to expand voter access, to talk to them about how there is no widespread fraud in our voter systems, to talk to them about how machine recounts are much more reliable than hand recounts, and to just in general be an advocate for the people. Because if we don't have those people to speak to places like this committee that'll be formed, we'll give up that space to people who are there for bad intentions.
Thank you for that, Tori. And subject matter experts. We're going to go to our next area portion that's dealing with volunteer testimonials. But Katie, I hear you. Augusta University has a cybersecurity center in conjunction with our Eisenhower/Gordon Army Fort. Perhaps they can help with experts. Let's talk, Katie. Let's definitely follow up with this. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Gael and Robert.
Thank you, Chris. And really quickly before I introduce Robert, I just wanted to shout out our Capitol observers, those that observed during special session. I know some of them are on the call tonight, this evening. So thank you all for spending your time and hours at the Capitol from early mornings from 7:30 all the way until 6 p.m. in some cases. So thank you all. We wouldn't be able to do what we do at the Capitol without your guys' assistance. With that, I'm going to introduce Robert Gorman. So throughout this evening's conversation, we've talked about how meaningful change depends on people showing up and making their voices heard. This session, we saw that spirit on display across Georgia, including at the No Kings marches, where thousands of people came together to speak out for democracy. We'd now like to hear from Robert Gorman, who lives in Athens. He is on the leadership team for the Indivisible Georgia District 10 and is co-chair of the Legislative Action Team. Robert, we would love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and hear about what inspired you to get involved.
Thanks, Gail. So I'm a relative newcomer to Georgia. I spent 38 years as the director of a social justice nonprofit in Louisiana and had experience there with legislative networks and meeting with legislators at the Capitol and even testifying at the Capitol in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But hurricanes and climate change, land loss, and increase of homeowners insurance drove my wife and I out of Louisiana, and we came to Athens, to Georgia. And I was completely unfamiliar with Georgia politics. Had no prior experience, had never lived in Georgia before, and felt pretty much powerless, uninformed, and unconnected. So my remarks will primarily be directed toward folks on this webinar who are in the same position I was 3 years ago. So I attended a meet and greet meeting of Indivisible Georgia District 10 and met some folks and got involved just by going to that meeting. And since then, I've attended rallies up to and including the 3 No Kings rallies. And I've participated in local advocacy, writing to state legislators, U.S. Congressman Mike Collins, and Senators Warnock and Ossoff. And a couple of years ago, agreed to co-chair the legislative advocacy team and to be on, as Gail said, the Indivisible Georgia District 10 leadership team. So I'm starting to understand the legislative process here in Georgia. I probably just this year, I've acted on over 24 legislative alerts at the local, state, and national levels. And that information, to my delight, comes from great statewide contacts like ACLU, immigrants' rights groups, religious interfaith networks, environmental groups, budget and policy groups. I've learned what a zombie bill is, for example. Never heard of that in Louisiana. And when I've made contact with legislators, sometimes, like with our state senator, in Baton Rouge, in Atlanta, he gets on the phone and answers the phone himself. So we've had some good conversations. We disagree on most positions, but it's nice to be able to talk to him in person. I've canvassed for progressive candidates, and since coming to Georgia, I've become a trained marshal and an immigrant legal observer. I'd never even heard of those positions before, and never connected with any organizations that dealt with that sort of thing. So even as a newcomer, as I mentioned earlier, feeling powerless, uninformed, and unconnected, that changed quickly when I made contact with Indivisible Georgia District 10. But that connectedness and that sense of being able to make a difference happens not just because of that contact, but with the other organizations that I mentioned, and in particular ACLU. So, for instance, some of the activism that these groups have made possible. No Kings 3 back in March. Here in Athens, we did it in 8 locations around town. We had rallies. And I helped with the one here in East Athens. We had projected a goal of 60 people protesting on one corner of one intersection in Athens. But over 200 people signed up online, and almost 500 people showed up. It was amazing. And that was just in one of 8 locations. We had families, children, adults, elderly, Black, white, Hispanic folks, Native American, Asian. I mean, it was a very diverse group, and the people had a good time. As a matter of fact, on one of the corners, and this was really surprising, there was a local pizza place, and they sent out boxes of free pizza to the participants. There was a smoothie place down the street. They were giving away free smoothies to people. They were so excited to have positive, pro-democracy, diverse citizens out there in the public at a rally, making our voices heard. And so it was great. And it was really cute. Just a quick, cute story. After the rally had ended, we only did it for an hour. I heard parents going by with their little kids, and the kids going, "Mom, you promised me an ice cream cone if I came." And the ice cream place was right on the corner where we were protesting. So that was awesome. So those kind of things are really, really fun, and they're a great connection. And so people talk about, well, should we put our energy into rallies and protest, or should we put it into advocacy and organizing? And in my experience, and what I've found here in Georgia is the answer is it's not an either or, it's a both and. And the organizations that are on this call and that are available practice that. They're both and. Just in closing, obviously, you're looking at me on the screen. I'm a 73-year-old white man. I don't have to worry when I go to these things about being hassled or harassed because of my participation in a justice issue. And that gives me kind of a privileged position. What I've been inspired by here in Georgia is connecting with diverse groups of informed, passionate, and strategic thinking people in organizations with the strong Black leadership we see here with ACLU of Georgia, Hispanic leadership like the Athens Immigrants' Rights Coalition, religious leadership in the Athens Interfaith Clergy Partnership, to name just a few. We've had League of Women Voters mentioned on this call. Georgia has great networking, even better than in Louisiana that I found, because the diversity of groups like ACLU, as Gail mentioned and Chris mentioned, there's people don't silo in their own organizations. They freely share information and resources with any citizen advocate. Anybody that wants it, whether you're a member of their group or not, they'll share the information with you. And that's what I've found. So no matter where you live in Georgia, you can find a group of people who believe in democracy, are committed to social justice, have experience and expertise about current issues, and know how to organize to get things done. So anybody on this call, I'd encourage you to connect with any of these groups. You'll find out that it's very rewarding to be part of an effort that makes a difference. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Rob. I mean, I think to summarize what you said, at least from my perspective, is that uh, you can find community in the most of the darkest times, right? Like if you go out there and you try to find people that are like-minded and care about defending the rights of others, you can find a good community that's diverse and intersectional. You just got to go out there and, put in the work. So thank you for sharing that. Chris?
Gail, Rob, thank you so much for the work that you do. Rob, we got to have you back. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being here. We definitely prefer you here in Atlanta than in New Orleans. So, and thank everyone else. The action items we listed, they're not just ways to stay busy. There are a lot of things that we can do between now and January. There are opportunities to shape what comes next. See the QR codes up there. So over the past year, we've seen how much is at stake. We've seen lawmakers introduce bills that affect free speech, voting rights, criminal justice, and countless other issues that touch people's daily lives. The reality is that next year's legislative agenda is already beginning to take shape. And one of the biggest factors that will determine what happens during the next legislative session this upcoming year literally is you. The election will determine who holds elected office, but it will also influence which issues lawmakers prioritize, what proposals will gain momentum, and what kind of political environment advocates will be working in. That's why I want you to encourage everyone here to get involved in the upcoming election. You got to. Everyone who registered for this event will receive an email from us in the next few days with links to the volunteer opportunities that we have shared before. You heard the stories. Now it's time for you to take action. So, hey, unfortunately, this is the end. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Thank you for your commitment to civil liberties and civil rights. And thank you for all you do to strengthen our democracy. We look forward to continuing this work with you in the months ahead. Look forward to seeing you. Have a good evening.